So this is Professor Braden Hill, Pro Vice-Chancellor, Equity and Indigenous at Edith Cowan University in Western Australia. So welcome to you for your feature snapshot on embedding equity, diversity and inclusion.
Thanks very much, Eddie. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation to talk to you all. Thanks also to Oman for that wonderful welcome. I'm really grateful that he could be with us here this morning. So Eddie did ask me to talk a little bit about ECU and the work that we're doing here, and I'm very happy to do that. A bit about me. So like Oman, I'm a Noongar man. I'm from the southwest of Western Australia, specifically the Busselton-Margaret River region, if you're familiar with Western Australia. But part of my role here at the university is to look after our Indigenous work, so Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander work. I'm the head of our Indigenous Centre, which is called Kurungku. And we operate like a mini university in that we recruit students, we support students, we celebrate when they go off and graduate and do wonderful things in the world. We also engage in a lot of teaching and learning as well as research. So we do quite a bit in that space. I'm also in charge of the university's broader equity, diversity and inclusion work. So a lot of the work we do around disability, widening participation in terms of low SES engagement, work around a whole range of things really, LGBTI inclusion, gender equity. So I have quite a broad remit, and I'm really delighted to be able to talk you through some of the work that we've been doing at ECU. So I've been here this is my third year now, so I'm relatively new to the university, but we've made some considerable steps in the right direction that I wanted to share with you, particularly around the importance of strategy and outcomes. So just a little bit about Edith Cowan University. I think a really unique feature of who we are is that almost 50% of our students across the board, across the entire university, are the first in their family to go to university. And I think that's an extraordinary statistic in that it reflects who we are as an institution. We have some 30,000 students across our various campuses studying a range of things. So it really speaks to the mission and purpose of our university. And it's a reason why I really enjoy working here. Our average student cohort, we often talk about our average student as being represented by a 26-year-old woman with a child. So it also gives you a sense of the unique nature of our student cohort. We have strong enrolments from Indigenous students, students with disability, and also students coming from humanitarian or refugee backgrounds. So it gives you a sense of how diverse our cohort and community is. So in the past, before I came along to ECU, I think it's probably fair to say that equity and diversity was something that was everyone's responsibility. And I think that absolutely is the way things should be. But what I've noticed in terms of the higher education sector anyway, is that often when things are everybody's responsibility, sometimes it leads to being no one's responsibility. And I think whilst we were doing some work on the margins, I think what I noticed at ECU is that we really needed a strong core focus to make sure that it truly was everyone's responsibility. But perhaps more importantly, in terms of inclusion, everybody knew how to do that work and had a strategic focus on that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that and the outcomes that we've achieved because of that. I think what we have now is a blueprint. It's funny because I'm not in my office today, Eddie. I'm in somebody else's office. And actually, I have a copy of our blueprint that kind of sits on the wall. So you can see I'm not lying when I say we've got one. But the blueprint, I just pitched it off the pin-up board. But that blueprint has about 20 key actions. And what we've done with that is consolidate probably 11 or 12 disparate, separate plans into one overarching blueprint. And largely that there was a practical consideration because for us, that's a lot of committee work. That's a lot of maintenance in terms of, monitoring on what we're doing. But this allowed us to bring it together in one whole of institution strategic document. Now, our strategic plan runs out this year, so it's only a short 2-year blueprint, and the idea is that it needed to be very action-oriented. So what we did was canvass the university community, so staff and students around what they see as being important in the equity, diversity, inclusion space, and we just said, there are 20 actions we need to achieve as an institution. These are the 20 we're going to push forward on. So that produced the blueprint that has helped us really catch up. We've had a lot of work to catch up on, but it's working for us at the moment. So when I first started, visibility in education was probably the most important thing. So universities, for example, I think around LGBTIQ plus inclusion, it's still fairly new in terms of the way we do that, not only in the way we market ourselves, but also the way we embed that inclusive work into our teaching and learning. So for me, across a range of equity matters, I really wanted to lift the visibility and the profile of equity and inclusion at ECU. So that meant doing the very typical things. That meant, you know, having guest speakers in, events around, raising awareness of all staff. So we can see this as a priority. And I think that was really critical to me, because I think it's only once people understand the issues around mental health, around disability access and inclusion, that people can actually see their role in being able to take on some responsibility in terms of creating a more inclusive university or organisation. So one of the things that was really interesting is that once we've done the whole visibility piece and everybody understands some of the challenges and opportunities, what we're now moving into with the blueprint is discussion about how do we embed this across all of our initiatives, all of our work. So how do we do EDI work in research? How do we do it in teaching and learning? And how do we do it in student engagement? And how do we embed that work in terms of our international student cohorts and campuses as well? So we're really at that phase now where we're changing the curriculum to be more diverse. I think we have to acknowledge at universities, we produce knowledge. And if that knowledge is coming from only one single point of view, we're just reproducing the status quo. And I think one of the things we need to be conscious of is that societal change is changing quickly. And you can either be changed by that or you can lead it. And what we're trying to do is get at the forefront of that and actually lead societal conversations around how we grapple with some really complex social issues. But to be able to do that, it requires a bit of courageous work. And one of the bits I think that's quite innovative from ECU's point of view is we need to understand the student cohorts who are coming in. So I'm going to talk from a student perspective in regards to some of the work we do. In higher ed, we think about students with disability, we think about Indigenous students, we think about students from low SES backgrounds. A lot of those things are really critical and they're really important. But what we're starting to understand now, there are considerable nuances within those cohorts that we need to understand. So an Aboriginal student can be a student with a disability. An Aboriginal student can also be a student who's LGBTIQ+. We need to understand that as students come into the sector in order to make sure that they have a really relevant student experience and teaching and learning experience. So that's kind of new. We're asking students if they'd like to provide that information to us, optionally, we can then act on that and shape their experience accordingly. So there's a bit of bravery in that. That's a bit bold, I think, in the climate that we're in at the moment. So I'm really, really pleased to see what we understand as a much more intersectional approach and allows us to see complexity in the individual. So I think this is a healthy way for us to see the world, because we are all individuals, and a more student-centered, person-centered approach when it comes to matters around disability and mental health is really critical. I'll just touch on mental health very quickly. One of the things that we're really keen on, and we see mental health is becoming more and more of an issue for the higher education sector. We need to think about how we can upskill our academics to be able to work proactively with students around mental health concerns. We have some very prestigious performance programs, WAPA, West Australian Academy of Performing Arts. It's an elite program, and it's a high stress, high anxiety environment. What we're thinking about is how do we make conversations about mental health a usual part of the student experience, and we're embedding that from the very moment they walk into our university. So that kind of approach, we're really excited. And I'll just touch on quickly in terms of the outcomes we're seeing. Last year we had I think historically the best results we've had for our equity student cohorts. We've seen, for example, a 10% turnaround in the pass rates for our Indigenous students, and all of the equity student cohorts that we're proactively working with, we're seeing considerable improvements in terms of their teaching and learning results. And that's a great indicator for us as a university. We need to think about the lessons that we learn from this to take into our new strategic plan to have equity, diversity, inclusion at the top of the agenda, because if it's not in the strategic plan, it doesn't get funded. So we're thinking about how we can do that at the moment. And for us, I think universities and external partners, people that we collaborate with, are going to be really important to centralising EDI at the heart of everything that we do. And I think the really important lesson that we're learning at ECU particularly is that equity, diversity, inclusion is not an optional extra. It should be who we are. And I think the work that we're doing is leading us in that space. So I'll leave it there. I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to share some of the work we're doing at Edith Cowan University. I want to thank Eddie for the invitation. But as you can tell, I'm very excited by this work and I'm delighted to be here today.